to start today by explaining a system, YouTube, that many people know, of course, as a sort of...
Just, who is addicted to YouTube?
Addicted
Yeah.
to YouTube. Yeah, I spent way too much time. So,
other addictions.
So-
Digital addictions.
So it's a system we all know as how the facade of it, like how it works, we interact with it. But what I want to do is explain the complexity that goes behind the scenes, how it's built really behind the scenes. And it's actually 3 generations of systems that are discussed in this talk. So it's a YouTube talk, of course. So where you have this lady who is a YouTube engineer who just explains like how it works, right? So this is an industry talk where she explains a bunch of the systems. So I just took a few screenshots and I'll explain this from her talk. So the first thing, oops, so this is not going to work really. Okay.
Commande-moi. Voilà.
All right, sorry. I'm producing those talks quickly, but not always with the best interaction. So, indeed, YouTube is really growing fast. This was 2 years ago, billions of views a day. It's outpacing television, so it's a lot of money at stake. A lot of advertising money, a lot of interactions that are creating more and more data that helps YouTube capture more of the market. There's this feedback loop between interactions creating data that can be used to create more interactions. So in her talk, she talks about 3 different systems that were implemented to run YouTube, basically. So the first one was there's always this idea of items and users. So the items are the videos, and it's a matching problem. Try to recommend videos to individual users, and indeed this drives a huge amount of engagement. 70% of, as was mentioned by Annie, 70% of the next videos that are played are videos that have been recommended, meaning 30% of videos you reach directly by a link or that you obtain by searching actively, because you're searching a topic. Right? So 70% is just YouTube deciding on what you should view next, essentially. So the first system is a big matrix. You have to imagine it as a big matrix where some users have watched some videos and they're ones, and some users have not. And the question is, how do you fill this matrix so it sort of is the simplest possible that successfully fills the matrix? That's kind of the idea, right? So it's like the simplest model that can explain how recommendations should work. That was the first system. But then there's this very interesting second layer, second system, which uses deep neural networks. So here you can see that there are 2 types of features: user features and item features. Right? So features about each individual user, features about each video. This might be things like the length of the video, the language, the topic that has been detected through some words, maybe some information about the comments that others have posted, whatever feature can be extracted. And this is all features about the user, where the user lives, what language we expect the user to speak, what interest we've inferred through some other need about the user, like their advertising profile, things like that, right? And it's basically building a big systems of inference, where we have those initial features, we deduce intermediate stuff, and we arrive at some vector that is much smaller, that is combined with the vector on the other side. Some joint computation is done and a prediction is obtained. Like some number close to 1 means, yeah, really, you should recommend that video. Some number close to 0 means, no, this is not a match between the 2. Right? So I find this very interesting because obviously, when trying to assess how dependent someone is on the system, you're not interested in that part. This is the content. You're more interested in what are the characteristics, the static characteristics that have been inferred about the user. Right? So one way to formulate hypotheses about how those systems work is that in all those layers of deduction that are part of these deduction systems, there are different things that those systems are going to try to detect, even though it's not made explicit at first. So maybe how much someone responds to particular stimuli, right? So if it's a listicle, for instance, do you know what listicles are?
No.
13 things you will never believe about Geneva. Oh, I want to watch that, right? So you click on that because it appeals to some instinct in some people to have some order, to have some curiosity, all of those things. So somewhere in there, there might be a measure of how much is that person susceptible to listicles. Not because someone has formulated this as, oh, that would be a great thing to measure, but because it's an emergent property of this system when you run it under some constraints. The constraints being here, these are the features we have chosen to select about a user. These are the features we have chosen to select about items, about videos, and we have an optimization function that goes for engagement, the number of hours spent on the site. And when you run this whole machine of optimization, that detects some features, right? So somewhere in there, that would be my hypothesis, there is data that is interesting to understand better how addiction work, and how addictions or possible addictions work in that particular system. In that particular system, echoing what you were saying, where the fact that there's one internet with many different types of services that will function all very differently. Okay?
I have just one question about multi-users, for example. How does it play in predictable models, for example, to think about multi-use of one tool could be used, one device could be used by the whole family, so you have different profiles. Is it capable of discriminating this kind of thing?
It might and it might not be.
No.
So it's not designed like this originally.
Not yet.
Not
Big Brother is figuring
It's not
out.
that simple. So it's not that simple. So it might. It's not explicitly designed to detect that. And the much better way to do things is to have people log in and be identified in a specific way. But then again, there are some features here that are going to be like, is this user on the move? Right? Is this user currently moving? And when the user is moving, then function in a certain way. When the user is not moving, function in a different way. And people don't use the phones the same way, don't hold it the same way. So some signals will start having a real impact. Although this might be more relevant to the next system that I will describe, because this is really, at least the way she presents it, it's really about detecting static features about the user. Right? It's not about this dynamic feature, is the user moving right now? So, as she highlights in her talk, there's a problem here of myopic recommendations. So, the short-term familiar content will get recommended first. And there is no accounting for time, for the long-term effect, right? It's about detecting static features of users, static features of videos, and then matching. And then, sure, you've seen some videos, so we don't recommend them anymore, but it's not accounting for the long-term effect. So it's about getting short-term gains, always, it transforms the question. The question becomes, what is the video most likely to maintain the user on site for a little bit longer? Okay. And that's what those systems, because they're optimized for engagement, that's what they end up solving, at least the second generation.
I think the particular reason why this is done on YouTube was because the interests of users change over time within the same session, and basically the recommendation algorithm wanted to account for that. So I don't think it's really particular to what we are trying to optimize here. It's really particular to the fact that me within a session, I can first be interested on music videos, and afterwards I can be interested on Barcelona videos, the football videos, and then basically the algorithm wanted to account for that specific shift. And that's the reason why they developed something that was actually adapting much faster to the actual behavior of the user.
Exactly. So this is the third version now, where this is from March 2019, our presentation, so it's fairly recent. And the third version exactly is about tracing the user journey over time in their interaction. One video at a time, what are they doing dynamically? So they're looking at the past, and trying to predict the future. But it's really interesting because they're trying to infer, I mean, they have what's above here, right? They have the interactions. Of course, at this stage where they do a recommendation, they don't know the future, but in a short while, they'll be able to measure it. They'll have the data actually of the future, right? So they don't have what's at the bottom. But what they're going to do is to develop models that predict user state from the past and predict the reward felt by the user from the future. All right, so it's really, they're going really, really deep in terms of trying to get into the mind of people. They're really trying to predict the user state. As you were saying, oh, this person right now, because they're on the move, because they are this, because they are that, they want to watch this type of video. And that will affect the predictions, the recommendations. And then they are trying to assess how rewarding it was to the user to actually see a particular video. Okay? I'm talking about this system in particular because it's probably one of the most complex that exists, but this is definitely the direction that they're all going. So they are not only, I mean, they're trying to do the meta job of doctors to try to understand what is rewarding to people and what are the dynamics that cause these rewards, right? So they've very much understood addiction loops, and they are even abstracting away from this in the systems they're building. And so this is how she represents this history, this user journey, right? So the N-2 videos, the N-1, the N videos, and trying to predict from this iteration the current state of the user. And all over the place, there are neural networks that try to predict this. So recurrent neural networks, those neural networks that are reused again and again over time. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter. But it's really about predicting, understanding the dynamics of people watching. So this is the user state, right? So the past, and this is about understanding the future and accounting for, really like you would do amortissement, right? Like you would do financial accounting, like you would try to understand the value of $100 in the bank now versus in a year versus in 10 years. They're trying to do the same type of accounting for what's the value to you of watching a video like this now or a little bit later and so on, right? So they're trying to assess the reward that you feel from that. Okay? So both, I had this slide that shows the whole thing. They're trying to predict two things, the user state and the reward. This is about user state, this is about the reward. She goes less into that part. And then she declares success. Success is what? We've rolled out our system and we have the biggest improvement in 2 years. An improvement of 0.86%. Right? So when people say we have the highest generation, the brightest generation of engineers that is there to optimize ads, I mean 0.86%. How much money was spent building those systems for that type of improvement? Right?
Excuse-moi, c'est quoi ce chiffre de moins de 1%?
So when she rolls out those systems that take into account the long-term effects, that try to, this third version of the optimizing system, that takes the time dimension into account, then the improvement in engagement and time spent on site is 0.86%. This is still her ultimate metric, but one of the justifications to switch from the second system to the third is that over time user trust declines because they're getting short-term recommendations and at the end they feel really bad about having interacted in this way for so long with the site. So because of this, they're trying to correct that by even meta-modeling when people become addict and how they become addict. That's kind of what I'm trying to explain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm very glad for that because it's not easy to explain. So, and the result is, okay, she manages to get 1 more % of interaction from that, 1 more % time, 1 more % of time spent on site. So, okay, so the big comment is that the version 2 tended to model stable characteristics of users, while the third version really models dynamic characteristics. So really, when you talk about addiction, you're talking about dynamic characteristics. How much time the person will spend tomorrow and how they will feel about it, right? Not just specific interest or this person likes that type of behavior. So in a way, it's good, like the motivation is good, is to make people feel that the time they spend on YouTube is rewarding. That's a good thing. But when we see all those systems and how they are deployed and how they always have blind spots, in a way it's very worrying, because it might be, another way to say it is it's trying to find all micro addictions, like ways that each of us will be the weakest and will be engaged for the longest over time without us detecting, and so on and so on. Right? So, all right, so a generic comment about all this is that, yes, it's always about driving engagement. There's a reward mechanism that comes in many different forms. We talked about lottery, even, money rewards and all of those things. User history comes into play. And this translates into many other areas from my own experience of interacting with different people. For instance, Uber drivers also talk about addiction. Addiction to earning money while working. Right, so this is what Uber drives on. It's like you're an independent, a freelancer, and you're making money because you're working. And you're about to disconnect, but they tell you, oh, if you stayed on the platform a little bit longer, you could make so much more money. Right? So this is not the same as gambling. It's not the same as online addiction. But we can talk about that later. But deconstructing those systems, like you were saying, that they were all different, this is something that's very useful to explain to people, to interact with them, to understand better how those systems work. So many of you have seen those types of graphs because I show them always, but this is really about deconstructing. Yeah, you guys are laughing because you've seen it a lot by now. But I think this is very... So this is the type of things that I'm doing when I'm trying to deconstruct services like Uber, how is a dispatch made? Because it helps explain to people and helps explain at which stage, what information they get, and really the micro details of how, because it's really at every step they think carefully about what information they display, what they don't, to try to generate as much addiction as possible. Or as much engagement, however you want to phrase it. Okay, so the main topic today is what can individuals do in this context. So I want to skip quickly over this because some of you have heard of it and we don't need to get into the details all that much. But we each have rights over personal data, over our own personal data. Whether we are a patient, whether we're a doctor, whether we're not a patient and we're just sympathetic to, or we just want to better understand those systems, whatever it is. So what is personal data? It's data about ourselves, whether we're identified or not, or identifiable. Okay, so it's data about an individual, essentially. And we have data rights. We have rights associated to this data. We have three main rights. The right of access, so to get a copy of our data. The right to data portability, which I'll say a little bit more if I have time. And the right to information about the logic of the processing in some specific context, when it's a lot of automated decision making, it has a large impact on individuals, on the individual. So decisions that significantly affect the individual. But, and maybe this is new to some here, I also want to highlight that we have another right, which is a universal right, the right to benefit from science. So the right to actually engage in scientific endeavor and measure the world, try to understand it better using the scientific process. Okay, so this is a very important right in general, but it's being emphasized more and more by citizen scientists, people who decide that they want to better understand the world and that they can. They don't need to be a scientist to do that. Okay, so this is the linkage that I'm hoping will come out of this workshop today, is that we understand, okay, we have data rights, and those data rights could be useful to do science. It doesn't matter whether we're scientists or not. This is just the situation. And so this is some background reading for those who would be interested. Okay, so here are some examples of the right of access. So if you go to the Blizzard Entertainment website, so this is my little information about it. You can go there and you can access your Blizzard account on game data, access any data related to working with Blizzard esports, access my Warcraft 3 or Diablo 2 game data, etc., etc. Right? So you can access quite a bit of information like this, but maybe not everything that is interesting. Right? So part of the effort would be to say, oh, that stuff is missing from that download. I actually would like to have access to that, so I can do more with that data.
It's a live chat.
What do you mean?
T'as vu la deuxième ligne? This week's maintenant schedule. Au-dessus.
What?
Tu peux pas l'avoir cette semaine.
I think it's because they were shutting down their site for, I don't know.
Okay.
But, so not all the data might be there by default. This is a typical pattern that you don't always have all the data. So this is where you can have another approach, which is, for instance here, this would be Snapchat. You can basically map the type of information that Snapchat would have. Notification data, we talked about it, right? How users come back all the time. Geolocation data, profiling information, device information, user interaction data. All of that type of data would be, well, it's certainly useful to optimize those systems to drive engagement, as we just saw. Why wouldn't it be useful to better understand how those systems are constructed and how effective we are, right? So this could be as simple as, I've never used Blizzard, I interact a little bit, I get this data, versus here is someone who is addicted to World of Warcraft. Let's get the same amount, the same data for their kids and see what the difference is. Okay? It might just be as simple as that to get started.
Just a little bit more about what does that mean, notification data?
Whenever you get a notification of some kind, so an email message saying, hey, you haven't played in a week, you want to play again? Right? Or
But that's not come from me as a user, it's come from...
yeah, from them. But they measure this interaction. So, sorry, this was not Blizzard, this was Snapchat, right? So on Snapchat, you get a notification that you have 5 messages or 5 likes or whatever, however it works on Snapchat. And they're sent at these specific times. And then through your user interaction data, they know that you have responded within 5 seconds to those notifications. Oh, that guy is hooked. Versus that person waited for an hour to go into this notification. Right? So these are about micro measurements, which maybe is not the usual medical approach of looking at the broader symptoms and everything, but it's definitely the micro engagements that are slowly driving more interactions. So it's not uninteresting either. Huh?
Do you think, so we can have this data, but do you think we may need to know how the data were used to rely on user engagement? To know, for example, where I go on Google, on page, I have some news, and the news I have were related to the one I saw before, like you say. So do you think the user may need not only to have access to the data, but also to know the data were used to rely on this engagement?
So the theory is that if it significantly affects the individual, then this might come under that umbrella. The right to information about the logic of the process. So the right of access is just about static data that is on a server somewhere. And the reality in the systems I was presenting above is that, every time you interact with a video, they're trying to make predictions. This is generating a huge amount of data that they are certainly not storing because they can't, just can't, it's too much. But still, it's generating traces that can be used. And so here's another way that I was trying to be very reactive to what you guys were saying, but I had planted the seeds a long time ago. So in May, I registered to the Loterie Romande intentionally on their website. as a honeypot, kind of. You know what honeypots are? So as a trap. So regularly they send me emails saying, hey, we haven't seen you in a long time. Right? So this is one I got in August for this game. So I started interacting with their email, went to their site, and then looked at what type of trackers were on the site. Okay? So one of them is AppNexus, which is one of the big marketing data management platforms. So platform that manages data behind the scenes. And I know, in this list, with the experience I'm starting to have, I know, AppNexus, this is good, because there is a portal where I can right away get information about what's the profiles they've built. So I went to AppNexus, and sure, lo and behold, Switzerland lottery interests, Switzerland online betting interests, coming from this company. Right? So we can start to see right away, immediately, the traces of this tracking that is occurring. From this company GAMD, that sort of works with AppNexus to track this data and to start building profiles. Right? So it becomes really interesting to deconstruct how this infrastructure works, because then we can all go directly to AppNexus, all go directly to GAMD, or patients can do the same thing, and we can start comparing what is being done between different people. We can also put more responsibility on those players to inform people of what they're doing, which supposedly is their obligation, their legal obligation, to inform people of the type of profiling that they're doing.
On this picture, can you come back?
This one?
Yeah, it's written 98 on 103.
Yes, so
your
this
data?
Yes, this is my data.
From this company?
Yes, and this is half of a page, 1 out of 103 pages of profiles.
Wow.
Et ça, c'est les données qui t'ont bouffé eux.
Yes, this is the profile they're building. So, and by the way...
Vous les avez les données. Vous les avez les données pour eux. Non, mais c'est vrai.
So just to be clear, NugAd, for instance, is... I was just talking about them 2 days ago because they are working with Swisscom and Admira, which is a big... it's like the Swiss Google, the Swiss advertising entity.
Platform.
Sorry?
Platform.
Yeah, the Swiss advertising platform. So the information that goes into those profiles here is your traffic, your internet traffic, right? So they're observing this internet traffic and inferring from that your preferences. You're making your face like, no, it gets really, really deep into the intrusion that is done.
But if you use a VPN, then you're cut out from.
So, yeah, you're protected from your internet provider being a bad actor. Yes, but you're trusting someone else, right?
Sure.
Yes, of course.
Puis tu le payes pas, alors c'est bizarre. Hein?
I'm actually wondering what is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to achieve here by trying to dig deeper into the system, because it looks like we're putting a lot of effort on trying to reverse engineering how the systems work, but are we actually tackling the problem at hand?
Maybe not, but we're certainly trying to better understand the problem.
Yeah.
Because my impression and I want to pose this, I'm sorry that I'm putting this now, but my impression of what you presented before is that you put it as if when developing these algorithms, these companies are actually perfecting their understanding of how these things work. And my understanding is that the actual problem is much more simple. So on one hand, what's happening is that these companies are over-engineering their systems. So obviously, I mean, they are developing machine learning algorithms that are becoming more complex, and they can be more accurate. And as Hans was saying before, because it is possible, these companies are doing so. But in my view, the problem comes not from the algorithms themselves, but what they are trying to optimize, which is time. And because they are trying to optimize time, the resulting algorithms that they are being created result in addiction. So it's not really that they have a good understanding of how addiction works, is that what they're actually building, because of what they're trying to optimize, comes into addiction. I'm going to put you an example. I mean, I'm working developing algorithms, and so what I realize is that it really depends on what's your interest. If instead of me optimizing the time that you spend into the website because I want to attract your time and I want to put more ads into you, if I was trying to optimize your satisfaction, the resulting algorithm will actually become something that does not learn how to hook you, but actually learns what you enjoy, or actually how, let's say, you might get something that you would be rewarded, you would like, but then you would go on with your life.
Improve engagement.
And so I'm actually wondering I'm actually wondering if by trying to reverse the engineering and trying to sort of track what the companies are doing, we're actually going to solve the problem. I'm thinking, are there other solutions? And maybe it's not the focus of the discussion, but
I think you're right. So it's certainly over engineering. It's they have a hammer and they're just building a bigger hammer to solve the smaller one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily a good direction, but I think it's good to deconstruct those systems and talk openly about them. Because some people don't know how this works, right?
Transparency.
And some people have just imaginaries of how that works, and this anchors it more. And whatever solution is built, it shouldn't satisfy just people like you. Whatever solution is found, it shouldn't just satisfy people who are highly technically literate. It should be more inclusive. That's my.
I think there are two for me, I don't know if you want to discuss now or later.
On peut commencer parce que
Sure.
bon,
Yes.
je pense qu'on peut être réactif parce qu'à 20h52, je pense que personne s'est embêté. mais-
Quickly, I mean, two points to your question. I think, first of all, it's important to understand the depth of which we're being profiled. And I think, as I said before, so many people just do not realize that. And even I think I know, but I'm discovering every time I talk to Paul-Olivier how far this thing is. It's just like amazing. The last meetup was just mind-blowing. And I think we need to translate that into understandable, banaliser that, if you like, to the general public, to see really how far this is taking it. And then the other question is, can we put it to positive use, to good use? We made this example of the BBC you mentioned. And I think there we need to understand what is the driver of that activity that has us coming back again and again. And that's the attention economy, That's where
what
you
makes
really,
the system bad.
Yeah, that's why, it's good to remember that the customers of Facebook, which is a multi-million-dollar company, are the advertisers, right? You have to remember, they're the customers. We're not paying anything. So to make it more valuable, to charge them even more, they'll get to know us even better, and we can pinpoint an individual and we'll get a better reaction, they'll pay more. So there is the business model that's behind, that is driving that activity to, let's say, not good use. But there's also the understanding of how far we can go in profiling people. And this could be, you could argue good or bad, irrespective of the business model. Is it okay that we're losing that privacy? So that's another question.
Just I see maybe one obstacle to the very positive willingness that you have with this whole project. It's when we talk about addiction, we talk about individuals that are capable to know that something could be harmful for them, and to make a decision in a biased way because they are addicted through continuing dysfunctional behavior, even if they really know, and we explain to them that this is harmful.
I understand this very much, and I also understand that there are some addictions that are like the lecture compulsive. So there are some angles where it's there is some element of discovering and understanding systems that resonates very much with me, obviously, but it's also part of my addictions come from that as well. So being able to deconstruct and understand and lay it out, even see it as data, just spreadsheets, transforms the relationship with those systems, which in itself might be, I would say, therapeutic, but can help change the look on this. I'm not pretending to be a doctor. I'm not pretending to be substituting, but it changes the perspective.
Yes, I thank you very much because I see very much applications for therapy. It's a huge mine for us as therapists. But the issue is if the willingness is to protect addicted people, maybe they will have the information, but they will not act to ask for their rights or to do something in concrete because they are hooked.
Maybe we're dealing with people who are addicted, but they're not diagnosed. So there could be another audience that we could have. People, for example, that they're having trouble with their sleep, and they don't understand what's the root cause of the problem. And for example, using the phone before going to bed on a long period of time. There is a cause effect there. Just a simple example. But
or maybe seeing it in continuous. In a continuum, we may see that, as you said, Sophia, some people may see the problem and understand it better, but are not able to change it. Some, for example, are so happy by the product that they may not stop to use it when they gain a reward, because there is like a slower saturation, so they don't feel it rewarded as sufficient, and they may go again. But part of the people may benefit from such kind of information. To some with slower level of addiction may move. We know that feedback may help some people change, and you say also, and maybe in the general society, maybe being more aware of such aspect help to be. To engage in this kind of technology in a more positive way, and you use a very important word for us is eclectic. And for in addiction, eclecticism is lost.
It's lost.
Lost.
Because it's focused.
Eclecticism is lost because we are more focused. And so, if we regain eclecticism, and in technology and outside, so in world also without Wi-Fi, without technology, and in world with, if we are eclectic, so we are outside the addictions aside. And
Olivier, I think you mentioned about this micro addictions. Is how do we deal with micro addiction if we simply by being eclectic, having more small addictions? Do you think that's really a solution for handling?
When I say eclectic, I mean to re-engage in other aspects of life. As Sophia said, she worked in Reconnect, and I think one idea
I label it like
is
that.
to reconnect to other kind of other aspect of life.
So it's not like hooked on more different addictions.
Not only.
I'm also curious about. So I know patient communities are really important to build support, people who suffer from the same thing. So I also know that gamers are some of them are extremely technically competent. So gamers do incredible stuff. They can, on some video games they collect all their interactions and then they simulate avatars of themselves to train against each other, just to show you the level of complexity. So I'm wondering about collective effects of understanding better how those addictions these addiction systems work, right? So doing not an individual getting his data and understanding it and seeing how this, but really like a bunch of gamers getting together who are using it too much and like geeking out over understanding how those systems work, which might be a way to connect a bunch of different people at sort of a meta level. So,
and I think it could be successful because the gaming community, for example, I know a little bit about them, and they are very supportive to other gamers, for example, who could be at some times in their life in a very problematic gaming pattern. And they are supportive and they understand when you are quitting, for example, a guild for massive multiplayer online or playing games, for example, and when you are you need to live your life or to have rest or to get some care, and they are supportive. I know what raises my interest, what appeals to my interest in your presentation is the knowledge these business models have about addicted people, let's say users, because they have the disengagement failure. So when a person, for example, a user is failing to disengage from some kind of context in a repetitive way, they have information about the reward system for a person, for a user. When a person, for example, is moving from positive reinforcement toward negative reinforcement,
from one state to the next, yes.
So they know that this person is in trouble. And the third is time and frequency, because frequency is also a risk factor for
video to video. Yeah. And when I was saying like they don't collect, they run those massive systems for each video recommendation. My assessment from the outside, I don't have any extra information, of course, is you don't know how the video ID interacts with the whole neural network, but they will store the individual states over time, video per video, for optimizing those systems. So that's another angle that's interesting, is you can go and theoretically ask for the historic data over years, really. That is the state transitions for each video. That's the theory.
But this is good because therapists could use it, for example, or a patient could ask for this data and to use it in therapy. But it is also kind of giving to policymakers, for example, the proof that you know people are in trouble and that you are hooking them and you are continuing offering them the same things that are in terms of social responsibility, for example.
Yes, that's very much.
Moi, je voudrais, tout à l'heure, on a parlé de l'OMS et du besoin de données pour faire des études comparatives entre pays, etc., etc., et pour accélérer l'implémentation dans les CIM, c'est ça, CIM, pour la CIM 12, les tests cliniques ont été faits à une échelle monumentale. On les a, les données, on les a. Si on les demande et qu'on les analyse correctement, on a les données du monde entier.
Alors, il y a les données d'usage, mais ce dont on parlait tout à l'heure, c'est la future SIM 11. Voilà. C'est la future SIM 11, c'est juste pour
oui, non, je sais, on a
les données de
étudié
prévalence. Voilà, des données de prévalence comparables. Là, c'est des données d'usagers. Oui, c'est au niveau mondial. Simplement, je pense qu'il y a aussi... il peut y avoir des problèmes de comparabilité, puisqu'on sait que dans certains pays où il y a des prévalences fortes, il y a des systèmes, des sites qui sont interdits. Donc il y a d'autres types de sites qui sont utilisés dans ces pays-là. Donc comparer des trends de business online qui sont différents entre différents pays, ça risque d'être un peu compliqué.
Mais par contre, c'est assez vrai que si on avait accès, parce que c'est pas qu'en théorie on pourrait peut-être, mais si on avait accès aux données d'usage elles-mêmes, même sur que quelques plateformes, en fait, on aurait énormément de données sur les patterns d'utilisation. Il y a des études qui ont été faites notamment en Suède sur des sites de jeux d'argent, où ils ont vu que des petits groupes de personnes, des petites proportions, se distinguent dans leur pattern de consommation et que probablement pour prédire un peu le moment où c'est plus difficile. Et là, je pense que ce type de données, elles sont peu utilisées dans les études qu'on a. Nous, on a les études avec des personnes, mais les études avec les utilisateurs, un peu, il y a eu une étude qui a été publiée par des ingénieurs qu'on travaille sur le Pokémon. C'est des ingénieurs de mémoire de Microsoft. Ils avaient les données de combien de gens avaient utilisé le mot-clé Pokémon Go dans Google, et puis comment les utilisateurs avaient utilisé Pokémon, et puis combien ils avaient marché. Ils ont pu regarder un peu Alors là, c'était plus avisé pour voir si les gens marchaient plus quand ils utilisaient Pokémon Go. Et puis ils voyaient comment les recherches dans Google étaient associées à une augmentation de la marche en utilisant Pokémon Go. Donc on aurait potentiellement, des choses. Et eux ont ces données.
Et oui.
Et eux,
ils ont l'obligation de les donner.
Ils les publient pas, ils les analysent.
C'est ça, mais c'est vrai que dans la logique que je recommanderais, ces données sont là et on a trois droits, comme je l'ai expliqué. J'ai pas parlé du troisième qui est le droit à la portabilité, qui est le droit de bouger ces données, qui est très important pour MyData. So the right to portability, to move the data around, to move it from one source to another, which might be another commercial player, because you want to move from Blizzard to Activision or whatever, but maybe from Blizzard to University of Geneva to analyze it, to just entrust it to them. And so I think personally that with respect to those big systems, this is the only way out. This is the only way to keep them accountable. Because what I really want to avoid is this dynamic where the companies realize their systems are bad, then they build even more complex systems, like we were talking before, to basically get off public pressure. But those systems are even more brittle, even more fragile, and it can actually lead to even worse outcomes, right? Because they will fail at the same time for everyone. This is basically the way those things work. And so this is to get outside pressure constantly, and I think that right is key for that.
I want to raise maybe one ethical point, because to collect data massively, to do with it positive things or negative things, you are doing things without permission and without and not respecting the privacy of the people. But if you get the consent from people, for example, and give them the chance to change their mind in some way, to not give you your data, yes, I would be willing to use data positively, but otherwise not.
And it changes another thing. So yes, all this would be with consent, but it changes another thing. It's for you guys, it bypasses the ethical review, because this data has already been collected. The way in the US, that's the way it works. The data has already been collected.
But maybe the point is important to don't do the same, to don't take the same way, and to create a civic movement where people ask or allow for something or another thing, or or to analyze in some way or another way. And I think in a citizenship movement, it is important to involve people in the decision, and it will increase the impact of such action. I think
one example, one counter example, maybe in data being collected, it's the permission to use them. Maybe it's research field, for example, in Switzerland, we are not allowed to use medical data for research purposes, even if you have the data, because you didn't declare before to ethical committee that you are willing to study something. Even if data are available, you have them, you are the clinician, but you are not able to, you are not allowed to use this data and to publish them.
there's another approach, and I think that would depend on the type of research questions that you're trying to ask, which is to actually crowdsource this data collection, right? So I think within the context of GridMe idea of creating a tool that will allow people to sort of benchmark themselves with other people, it would actually be possible, for example, and especially, for example, if you wanted to collect data about mobile phone usage, because that's something that you wanted to do. I mean, you could imagine, and I'm not sure if that's possible by the way, but people requesting their data from their iPhone, passing it through a system that gathers their data safely on off-GridMe, compares them with other users, so users get some feedback, some incentive on participating onto this research project, and basically the data is donated with the consent of the users, so you're actually using it for your own interest, right? And I think something that I've been thinking about during the whole talk is we're talking about addiction, but we're saying, all of us, we're saying that we're addicted to these things, right? And so I think this puts us apart a bit from other addictions like tobacco. And I was wondering whether could we talk about, instead of addiction, can we talk about unhealthier behaviors regarding digital usage? Because if we start thinking about this, then basically we're talking about some behaviors being more unhealthy than others. And basically the data collection that we have, it's about unhealthier behaviors, and we have different degrees of healthier and unhealthy behaviors, and some of them lead to addiction and certain aspects and so on. So basically we're building, as you say, a citizen data collection of unhealthy behaviors that lead to that are make it possible to respond to some research questions. I'm saying this because I think here there's an example of people that are interested on understanding their behavior better, and obviously giving their data would actually benefit everyone, right? So, I mean, I'm thinking that could potentially be a different way of doing things. Obviously, it does not solve the question of the algorithms. I understand it's a completely different thing, and that's why I was saying that might actually serve responding to specific research questions and not to all of them.
I just want to say that we are not all addicted.
No, I'm saying we are using this term. I'm saying we're using this term.
Yes, right? And addiction, it's for minority. Most of people are in capacity to not to go with those algorithms. For example, people could disengage from platform or website when they feel that they are repeatedly offered certain things that they don't want to, and they are changing their pattern of use, and it becomes unhealthy when we are incapable to disengage in continuous way or repetitive way.
Okay, so I think we need to wrap it up. Thank you for everyone's engagement.
No, thank you everybody.
I want to finish with two things. So the first is there is a petition for those who are interested that MyData Geneva is trying to launch. It's quite a simple demand. It's for the city, the canton to join what's called the Coalition of Cities for Digital Rights. So you can go to our site and look up the petition. It's a very, how to say, not very problematic, not highly charged politically, to just ask for basic rights to be respected in Geneva, the City of Human Rights.
Needs to be from Geneva to sign it?
The petition is for Geneva and the region. And the other thing is next week, lunch, we'll have another meetup announced on the meetup page. So it's a different angle. It's about using maybe this infrastructure for mapping out the city and for dreaming of different ways of interacting with the city once MyData-like services emerge. So if we really control our data, what kind of infrastructure do we need at the city level to respond to that move? And how? So this is to build it together, to prototype it together. Okay. Do you want to add a few words?
Il est actif.
Thank you. No, we don't want to close. I mean, we could do some kind of after hour, which we're going to do, I guess, of here, or if you want to join us, if you guys are free, we could go to the pizzeria next door. It looks good from here at least. And thank you so much again. And if you have ideas to stay in touch, to exchange ideas, please come to our next events or email us your contacts, join our newsletters. So thank you so much.
So huge and wonderful work.
But thank you so much for coming.
Much.